that maintaining lifelong friendships, which some of his oldest friends are not here today. Some of them are in Oklahoma, his friends from West Virginia who really wanted to be here. Maintaining lifelong friendships requires a lot of effort, but that is what adds richness and depth to our lives. So thank you again for being here.
Meredith.
So like her. I'm Gayle Younghein.
We're glad you're here.
John Younghein is my baby brother. And he was born in June of 1948 in West Virginia. My parents had been living in New York City. My dad worked at LaGuardia Airport during the war, and that's where I was born. But my dad was from a farm in western Nebraska, and my mother grew up in Indiana. So living in New York was really exciting for them, that they knew that it wasn't where they wanted to raise their children. My mother would have me by the hand on the subway, and people would be coming along behind me saying, "Can't you move along? Can't you move along? Can't you move that baby along?" So it didn't take them very long to decide that they wanted to move out of New York City. They wanted to raise their children someplace else. So my dad got a job at an airport in West Virginia. And they moved there when I was about 3. And that's where my brother was born. My parents bought a house on the top of a hill in West Virginia. And there were 5 houses on the top of that hill, and there was a dirt road going up the hill. And across the street from where we lived was land that the Spencer family had received from service in the Revolutionary War. That was our playground. That's where my brother and I played. And we built forts. We dug trenches. We climbed trees. I mean, we did anything we wanted to that land, and there wasn't anybody out there to tell you, "Oh, no, you can't build a trench there." Thousands of acres of pristine land and nobody around. So it really was our playground. And we'd play out there until it got dark. And sometimes we came home for dinner. We did that sometimes. And then after dinner, we'd beat it out the door again and go play until the street lights came on. I know that all of you have had experiences with the street lights coming on. Because when the street lights come on, that's when your mother goes back and calls for you to come home. So she'd come out and she'd call, "Gayle, Johnny, time to come home." We'd ignore her, We were good to go for another 15 minutes, We kept fooling around. And pretty soon she'd say, "Gayle, Lady Younghein, Joe and Kenneth Younghein, you come home this minute." Look, we got to go home now. This is really serious. Oh, one of the things, I think that my brother was a Cub Scout. I don't remember, except that I do remember that he learned to build a fire in the Cub Scouts. So one day, he decided he was going to build a fire. And so he went over to the field across from our house on the Spencer land, and he proceeded to build a fire. And it got bigger and bigger. And pretty soon the field was on fire. And I think at some point, somebody probably said, "Oh, maybe we should call the fire department." So the fire department came, but I remember my brother ran across the road, ran out of the house, wham, he slammed the door. He ran upstairs, ran to the bedroom, wham, he slammed the door. I heard him go into his closet, wham, he slammed the door. The firemen came, they put out the fire. And my parents never said anything to him about it. I think they figured that he learned his lesson. My brother, he liked to spend money. I should say, you probably know that. Oh, yeah. So anyway, we got 25 cents allowance, my brother and I. And I would save mine. I saved my 25 cents until I had $3. and I bought myself a pair of roller skates. Well, my brother, he would get 25 cents, and he would beat it out the door as fast as he could go. He'd beat it down the hill to the country store. He'd get in there, and he would buy 25 pieces of penny candy, and he'd bring it home. And we weren't allowed to have any candy, but he'd bring it home and hide it, there. I remember one time we'd gone up to the northern peninsula on a fishing trip with my grandparents. And he was just little then. He must have been about 4 years old, or I must have been about 7. And every night my grandfather would take us down the road to this little country store to buy us a Hershey candy bar. That was a big deal. So we're going down the road one night, we're going towards the little store, and my brother looks up at my grandfather and he said, "Grandpa." "What, John?" "I want a 10 center. And Grandpa said, "A 10 center?" He said, "Yeah, I don't want a 5 center. I want a 10 center. He wanted the big candy bar, right? He always wanted the big candy bar, the more expensive candy. And of course, we weren't allowed to have any candy. That was a big no-no in my house. We absolutely were not allowed to have any candy. It was forbidden. So, him buying 25 pieces of penny candy was, a pretty big deal for him to get away with it. One time, we were on a road trip with my car. We were going down the highway. We stopped at a filling station. My father went in, buy some gas, and my brother went in, and they had suckers, strings of suckers, penny suckers, and you could buy a whole string of suckers for 25 cents. Well, my brother took his 25 cents, and he bought a whole string of suckers in cellophane wrapping. It was really, really fun. So we get back in the car, we're going down the road, and he's trying to open the cellophane so my mother can't hear him. Crinkle, crinkle. She turns around, she said, "Do you have candy back there?" He says, "No." So then we proceed. We're trying to get the cellophane open. She gets really mad. She turns around again. She said, "I know you have candy back there. You give it to me right now." And she turns around, and my brother is hanging on to the string of suckers, right? And she said, "You give me those suckers right now." He goes, "No, no." And he starts to scream, and she grabs them, and she's so mad. She rolls down the window, and she hurls them out the window. Well, that didn't go over real well with my brother, And he can also retaliate, too. So, we're going down the highway, 60 miles an hour. He opens the back door of the car. My father, he comes to a screeching halt off the highway. A cloud of dust and small snow, the dust is coming up. And he jumps out of the car, and he opens up the back door, and he grabs my brother. Wow. Don't ever do that again. He gets a really good spanking. He got a number of those in his life. In 1956, we moved from West Virginia to Oklahoma. My parents also decided that West Virginia wasn't the greatest place to raise a family. My parents were self-taught, but they were intellectual and smart and pretty progressive. And my mother had started a Planned Parenthood clinic there. They just decided that they wanted to move someplace that was a little more sophisticated. Anyway, what did they know? So my dad got a job in Oklahoma City. He was on the team to come out to Oklahoma in 1956 to start the Federal Aviation Agency. So we moved out in 1956, and life was good, My brother, he was a cute kid. He had a lot of friends, and that was back in the day when you didn't call somebody up, to come out and play. You just went down the street to their house and yelled for them, and we'd knock on their, "Hey, can so-and-so come out and play?" Those were the days when, you just showed up at people's houses. I mean, you'd be sitting in the living room and suddenly there'd be a random kid in there. "What do you do? You belong to?" "Oh, I'm so-and-so and so-and-so." Anyway, that happened a lot. And, I'm trying to think. my brother had a good friend named Ray Broadfoot. He's a really successful dentist now in Oklahoma City, but he lived at the house behind us. And he and Ray Broadfoot had this secret Native American call that they make to each other, you know. And my brother would go up the back, watch it, he'd go, caw, caw, caw. And he'd listen for his friend Ray Broadfoot, you know. Pretty soon you hear Ray Broadfoot going, caw, caw, caw. That was the signal that it was time to join forces. We had a lot of spring-fed ponds in Oklahoma. The Native Americans came down in the wintertime to camp there, so we find a lot of arrowheads. But my brother and I were always determined to build a raft that was going to float. So we didn't have very good luck. Every raft we built these rafts, we'd haul it to the farm, we'd get on, and about that time, but we never told my mother. We'd go home, we'd kind of hide our wet clothes, you know, because we didn't want her to know that we were building these rafts that kept stinking in the pond. But, you know, the water in Oklahoma was fresh. We played in the creeks, we caught broadheads. And little did I know that one day we'd be eating them and they'd be a delicacy, you know. Another quick story, my father bought a boat, and you don't have a family activity, and so we'd go to the lake. And we were coming home from the lake one time, we were really tired, we stopped in to get burgers. And my brother always wanted a burger, plain burger, with nothing on it, no ketchup, no mustard. Anyway, the burger comes in, it's got ketchup on it. And my brother has a thing, he said, "This burger's got ketchup on it, I'm not going to eat it." And my mother gets really mad. She said, "Just scrape the ketchup off the burger. Eat it anyway." He said, "No." And he rolls down the window and he throws it out. So it seems that we have a history of someone throwing something out the window. Either my brother throwing the burger out and my mother throwing the sucker out. Anyway. But I do know that my brother started a band. Tina's friend started a band. It was called the Montons. I don't know where he got that one name. Anyway. They thought that they played pretty well, but actually, they played like shit. They really like their own music, but I'm telling you, it's bad. So they got jobs. But one time they got a job at a roadhouse in some little podunk town in Oklahoma. And they got a job at a place called, and I'm not kidding you, the Club I-1, between Wewoken and Seminole. And it was one of those places where they had the chicken wire fence, you know, around the stage, kind of like a Blues Brothers movie, you know, where they pay you for 3 days in advance. Because, you know, if the Indians and the Cowboys started throwing beer bottles and anybody got hurt, you just packed up and left and you didn't need to come back. The teams would get pretty well in there. The Indians would get really robbed and the girlfriends would be flirting with the Cowboys and the big fight would break out and they'd be hurling beer bottles. And so that's why you had a chicken wire thing. I think that was one of their, you know. In 1971, I was working on a passenger shipment in South Pacific. The home port was San Francisco. And when I sailed in under the Golden Gate Bridge, I said, "It's it. I'm staying." My brother had graduated from OCU, and he knew that I was in San Francisco, so he called me and he said, "I want to come out and live with you." And I said, "Okay." So he loads up his Volkswagen and he comes out. He stays about 3 weeks and he calls home to his dad and he said, "Put my clothes on the Greyhound bus. I'm not coming home." So I had a friend who moved up, and there were 3 of us, and we decided that we needed an apartment in Sausalito. Really? Anyway, my brother got a job at Cal Hi-Fi of Fillmore. He'd always worked in the hi-fi business during high school, so he got a job. I got a job working for an investment banker. That was a disaster. I was a terrible employee, but I was pretty entertaining. He worked there for a long time, and he commuted back and forth across the Golden Gate Bridge, and I traveled with him. But we had wonderful, hilarious, good times. And we were there, my brother and I were there for a couple of years. And I would say that, that was a really happy time for us. I would say that for my brother and I, being there together, this sounds kind of weird, but it was kind of like a honeymoon period for us. We never lived together as adults. You know, we were living together, we were having fun, we were going to bars, so we went to bars, and, you know, and events. And it was a really, really happy time in our life. You know, my brother was a very kind person, he was a sweet person, he was a generous person, and most of you, you know that already. And it was great. Well, then he left and went across the Bay to Walnut Creek, and that was it. And I don't know where I was, someplace else in the world. But as I reminisce a little bit, as I look back, I realized that that was a really innocent time in our lives, from all of that. And what a sweet and wonderful, charming childhood we had. It was like a combination of Leave It to Beaver and All in the Family. It couldn't have been any more precious. Thank you.
You can do it. That's a tough act to follow. Yeah, thank you for those great words. It wasn't too different in our household either. Mom and Dad come out on the porch, come to dinner. The street lights came on. We also had coasters. We lived on a hill in Berkeley, and we took it another step further. The Jaspers next door put an electric motor from the washing machine on, and we could roll that thing up the hill. It was great. We had the whole deal. Thank you for those kind words about jumping. So, in 1916, Jack London made this statement: "The proper function of man is to live, not exist. I shall not waste my days trying to prolong them. I shall use my time." Those adjectives like active, passionate, describe John Younghein. He was a great, great man. Now this may come as a surprise to Monica, Meredith, and Andrew. Johnny wasn't a perfect man. But he was the best friend you could have. If Johnny liked you, you were a friend for life. I was looking for my first job, full-time job, and I walked down the street, Shattuck Avenue, and Larry Ginsberg, where are you? Larry Ginsberg hired me as a stock boy at Cal Hi-Fi in Berkeley. I didn't know it at the time, but as Gayle said, Johnny was working for Cal Hi-Fi in San Francisco. The business was really fast-paced, and really not too many months later, Johnny got promoted to be the manager of this Oakland store across from the Paramount Theater on Broadway. I joined the team as a salesperson, and that was the time when the Oakland A's began their World Series run. We sold stereos to some of the ball players. Heck, later on, Blue Moon Odom and I played golf together. You remember? Yes, I bought a stereo from the guy with the curly hair. That was Johnny. So, Johnny and I formed a friendship that lasted. It was very enduring. That we and a bunch of like-minded people rented a house at South Lake Tahoe at Pineman Village. And every year we went skiing. Great deal. We had Tuesdays and Wednesdays off because he's the manager. And so we'd drive up to Tahoe Monday night, stop at Harvey's Casino, have dinner at the stage room, visit with my brother who had a great job as a ski bum, and went skiing. So it was he had a great trip too. We never worried about the snow on the road. We each had extra tires with wheels and snow chains on us. With the snow set, we jacked the car, swap the wheel sets out, continue on our way. One year, there was a weekend that I didn't get to go skiing. I don't know what it was, had some commitment or something. And it was a good call on my part. Johnny made the California Highway Patrol magazine with the headline, "Go Bump Without a Lump." Johnny had personal license plates, "Go Bump." And this car had skidded off Highway 50, hit a tree, and totally crushed the passenger compartment. So I didn't ski that week. Neither did Johnny.
You know, that's not the story I heard. I heard you were.
These are the, now, I thought this would come up. Johnny was a salesman. This is the true story. I would lie to you. Now, when Johnny was younger, he liked to go camping too. And a Cub Scout, I think, he didn't get very far. I had my first brand new car, a '74 Mustang hatchback, and we were coming through Yosemite. Decided to camp out at White Wolf Campgrounds. It's the high Sierras. We pulled into the campground, and this family of 3 bears was crossing over where we were going to sleep. We watched as they come out of sight. I go, looks safe now. So we pitched the tent to go to sleep. When we got up the next morning, the car right next to mine, I guess, must have had food. They smashed the windows and torn up the interior. Oh, it's good times. So after Cal Hi-Fi, both of us moved over to Pacific Stereo. We worked at the flagship store for a while together with the likes of, I've got to read this list, Charlie Morning, George Heckman, Billy Pearlstein, Artie Stein, Tony McCauley, Danny McCloskey, Ralph Bankus, Mary Miller, Pam Sanders, Hunter McDonald, Frank Bolton, and Noel Farmer.
And John Bass.
And John Bass, thank you.
Johnny Bass, yeah.
This is all the front page guys. I was more of the second page kind of salesperson. But they used to run an instant credit promotion where you have a driver's license, checking account, one other form of ID, and you could get instant credit up to certain amounts. Not everybody filled out those paperwork properly. And I think the manager was Frank the Paint Bolton. He told us to go up to repossess a stereo that had purchased on a fraudulent instant credit application. We said, sure, yeah, we'll do that. We're not criminals, not yet. So, based on his driver's license and credit app, he was living in Hangtown, which is Placerville on Highway 50. So we decided after we finished coming home, we stopped at the sheriff's office and asked him, yeah, where this guy is sort of shaking. He goes, yeah, we've got our eye on him. We think he has a house full of stolen equipment, gear. And so we go, oh, okay. He says, but don't go there, because if you knock on the door, he will just say, hey, somebody came and stole the stereo, and we'll be none better off. You know, we won't get the stereo back anything. We took that good advice, went to the house anyway. So, and we got to the door was open. Went in, nobody home. We decided, hey, let's unhook this puppy and throw it in the back of Johnny's car. As we were leaving, this is the honest to God truth, less than a block away, here comes the guy in his Porsche 911. I duck down, Johnny hits the gas. No criminal record. One of the great perks of working at Pacific Stereo was the Bay Area seating service. We had first access to all the hot shows in Northern California. We went and saw Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, Fifth Row Center at the Oakland Coliseum, Elton John, we saw Paul McCartney and Wings, just you name it. But the most important one was the Who played Winterland, limited seats, like 3,000 seats. Johnny and I got tickets, and I took my wife, first date, 1976, and they said it wouldn't last. We had motorcycles. In fact, the Sombrero boys are here. Johnny and I each had the top-of-the-line BMW R90S, beautiful sport bikes. And we had the Silver Smoke Gourmet Touring Society. I didn't stay in motorcycles too long, but Johnny stayed for a long, long time. And went to Lee Tillman, we had some great times. Johnny went on to go on trips to the Alps, Scandinavia, New Zealand, Eastern Sierras, all over the place. And the best thing that happened that's the Gins, man. Johnny introduced me to Dale Sprock in 1981, and another lifelong friendship developed. Johnny and Frank Leonardi went on to Wilkins Mason, Sony, Bell South, and then finally Apple. I stayed with Pioneer, headed up the marketing department for their Laserdisc division. I still got some if you need. So about that time we were having children, and our priorities changed, but we stayed in touch. Johnny was always a car guy, as you'll see. He had the Mazda RX-7, Audi Turbo 5000, 58 vet, Hemi Barracuda, and so many more. But there's one car that stands out that just was sort of an anachronism. It doesn't quite fit. At my wedding in January '77, he showed up in a 1977 Oldsmobile Cutlass, white, with white sidewall tires, white vinyl top, white interior. It must have been a pimp mobile. It's the only way to describe it. He owned more cars than most people own shoes. And I think Monica can attest to this. At one time, he had 9 cars and multiple motorcycles. The man had wings. And in '92, Johnny and Monica purchased the equipment and bottling rights to Brillianized. And with the help of friends at Apple and Fry's, they developed the Clearscreen and Ike, their business. And initially, it was true entrepreneurial style. They packaged, bottled, and did everything out of their garage. In fact, Meredith and Andrew's friends in high school came over the weekends to build product for sale. After about 3 or 4 years, finally Apple took notice, brought the product in for worldwide distribution, and we were along the way. In 2006, Johnny offered me a job managing the industrial business, and we worked our butts off, selling just boatloads of product at the trade shows. And as Meredith mentioned, in 2008, Johnny sent me this email. I guess he had some thoughts he might not make it home for this motorcycle trip. Listed all these songs. And music was so important to us. I mean, we were so lucky. Rock and roll, the British invasion, singer-songwriters, the blues, jazz, everything. And all the songs I agreed. But now I know why. There was one song that stood out. It's MacArthur Park. You think he knows something, and then he chooses that song. Well, now you know why. But every other song, Dock of the Bay, Ferry Cross the Mersey, Satisfaction, all tops. I continued to work with Johnny till just after the pandemic, and it wasn't a week would go by, I would get 3 or 4 calls. Why do you do this? What's going on with Amazon? How do I handle that? And now I realize I miss those calls. Johnny was a great guy, and I miss you, brother.
Folks, welcome. This is just the beginning. This is a story that goes on and on because Johnny lived life very large, and the evidence is all of these people and the great stories that we have here that we're sharing. And I hope you're all enjoying it. We certainly had a lot of laughs, a lot of tears, a lot of fun over those years. He left Monica with a lot of challenges after his death. Been in touch a lot with her, and I want to acknowledge a couple of people who've been trying to help you out. You know, Dave Wallace, you know, your daughter, Andrew, his family, Tim Arrington, all of those people. You know, we're here to stick with you and help you through it because Johnny lived life in a big way. He left you some big challenges. Really want to give ultimate thanks to Meredith for putting this thing together. She just spent endless time making all of it happen. Absolutely phenomenal. And to dig up all of these pictures, which we haven't seen them all yet, but it's just pretty amazing. Meredith called me a few weeks ago and she said, gee, can you fill me in a little bit about how you met my dad? And I said, I'll have to think back. Probably more than 50 years or close to it. And it turns out that when Johnny was at Pacific managing a store, I had been in retail. And somebody came into me and said, you got to get out of retail and you become a rep. This is ridiculous to work in retail all this time. So I started as a sales rep for a company called Sinai Johnson, and we represented Harman Kardon. Harman Kardon made some great equipment. One of the things they did not make so great was a model called the 800 Plus. It was a quadraphonic receiver. A little joystick on the side of it like that. First task I had going to Pacific Stereo was, Dale, get a portable soldering iron, take this little circuit board, there's little wires on it, go in and take the cover off of these receivers and solder this new piece in here so the damn thing works correctly. That's when I met Johnny. What are you doing in the sound room, taking this equipment apart and trying to do this stuff? But that was how we met. The rest of it's pretty much history. I've a lot of stories, but I don't want to be redundancy. I wanted to let you know the story of Brilliant Eyes as I remember it. And Dave Wallace, Johnny and I, working together at Pioneer as the sales rep for Northern California. We introduced the Laserdisc, as Dave can attest to, and the damn things were quirky. If it had a fingerprint or a smudge on it, it did not track well. It was worse than an LP that had been scratched by a nail. But I had heard, and Johnny and I talked about it, we said, we gotta find something to clean these discs up so that they play properly. We came across a product called Brilliant Eyes. And we went to the San Francisco airport to a store that was selling to aircraft owners and pilots and United Airlines and people that they polished the windshields and the windows on aircraft, which was mostly Lexan. And we bought Brilliant Eyes. We ended up using that to make sure that the Laserdisc worked when we did demos all over Northern California. And years later, that's how Brilliant Eyes came to be part of the Younghein family. He stuck with it the whole time. Most of you have probably experienced that, as Dave already mentioned. You get a call from Johnny and you look at your phone and you say, I know what's coming. Hey buddy, I got a story for you. Did you hear about this new record? Did you hear about this musical performance? Did you happen to hear about this car? Did you hear about this? You know, it was an endless thing that would bring joy to your life when you saw that phone light up and say, Johnny Younghein was calling. Hey buddy, want to talk about something? And it would go on for mostly an hour, almost all the time, for years. We could go on about road trips, going to Dennis Reagan's house in my convertible on the coast, and we'd get there and say, hey, look at those two gay guys in that white car. Johnny kept that line on forever.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Exactly. You know, he came to visit us in McMinnville, Oregon, where I live now, and he comes with his big yellow Hemi and makes a big statement and everything, goes away, comes back later that day with the biggest Subaru I'd ever seen in my life. I said, what the hell happened to the Hemi? He said, well, I left it at the door, I bought this car. And we need to figure out how to get both of these back to Northern California. Okay, that's not an unusual thing, we used to do that a lot. He, one time at a CES, I got deathly food poisoning. Oh, no problem, we'll just drive you back home, no problem. That was John. He would take care of you no matter what was wrong, looking after you, best friend you could ever have. He brought his motorcycle up to Oregon one time, and he was leaving town, and I don't know what I was doing, still working now, but I was still working then. I got a call from the hospital and said, your friend Johnny's in the hospital here, and he's been trying to get a hold of you, but his phone doesn't work inside the hospital. I said, oh great, what's the deal? He said, well, he crashed his motorcycle on the main street downtown. Can you come and get him? So we got him, and he said, I don't know, Dale, I'm going to call Mark and do something about the motorcycle. How am I going to get back to Danville and Walnut Creek area? And I said, we'll stuff you in the Audi and we'll bring you back down there, no problem. So here we came, and you know, a few years later, the Subaru comes back to the driveway. I said, what's going on? He said, well, I leased this thing, I'm giving it back. They want to give me more money for it than I paid for it. Probably made Johnny happiest in his life that he got more money for a car than he probably paid for it in the beginning. But in any case, the stories can go on and on forever, but you know, just one final thought. If there really is an afterlife for any of us, we hope, and I hope, to see Johnny again, because it's been a great ride.
That's the neurologist. So I'm John, but you know, my dad's son, and I've always been Andrew, and it's been a very confusing life for me from a naming standpoint, and to just further perpetuate the generational trauma, we named our oldest son John. But we call him Jack, and he doesn't even know his name is John. So, there's Johnny, there's Andrew, who's also John, and then there's John the fifth, who's not the fifth, who's technically the third, who's Jack. And I really didn't want to talk just because I can be a mess. Family events like this, and I'm not the outgoing one, but I did just decided I was going to read what I posted. But when my dad passed, somebody brought it up and said that it was a really good encapsulation of, who my dad was. And I said, Johnny, to his friends, he had a big personality and a bigger heart. He was a lover of the best things in life: music, hi-fi equipment, views, dogs, fine wine, great beer, anything fast, cars, bikes, skis, and his family and friends. A man with more than 9 lives, and sometimes more than 9 vehicles. My dad didn't leave any meat on the bone that was his life, but we wished for more time with his grandsons, both small.
And the little ones will be here in a little bit, so you can see how adorable they are. They are truly the cutest you can imagine.
But to toast my dad, is probably the only famous line that I've ever said, which is, "My dad almost always makes it."
Almost always makes it.
And that's why we're here. To a man who outlived everything else in his life. And thank you to all his friends.
Johnny!
Right? On with the show. On with the show.
Put a glass of water here.
Well, that's the problem.
So I'm John Falconer, and interestingly enough, although Johnny and I became very close friends, and we both worked at Pacific, I started there in 1969, we never knew one another at that time. And we became friends because I had put together a reunion of Pacific Stereo employees in 2013 and had managed to gather up a bunch of names and ability to get in touch with people. And in that year, later in the year, Johnny thought it would be a great idea to thank Ted Bennett for the consideration he had shown for so many of the employees who'd worked for him, including me and Johnny. And he reached out to me, Johnny did, saying, "Hey, can you help me find the people who would be appropriate to enjoy toasting Ted and thanking him for what he did for us?" And so I did. And I've got my crib sheet here. Well, after that, and it was a very successful party, I think, held at Ted's home in Berkeley. Johnny and I just fell into being together. It turned out that we shared interests in many different things: motorcycles, women, wine, music, and we started seeing one another irregularly but frequently. We would get together for lunch at Trader Vic's. Often Dale would join us for those. And then it turned out Johnny was still into riding, and so we would ride. We rode up in the Sierra, we rode up into Plumas County. And then finally, in, what year was that? It was 2018, Johnny, who was always a little bit more outreaching than I was, said, "Hey, you know what we should do? We should go to New Zealand, and we should ride motorcycles around the South Island." And I said, "Are you kidding? We're too old for that shit." And he said, no, let's go. And I said, "Oh, all right." And we did. And it was an epic outing. It was a time of bonding. You know, we were roommates, for God's sake, in our age, staying together every night, living through I think in the 13 days of writing, we had 11 days of rain, so it was quite an experience. But we went on to continue as friends in many different ways. We would go together to Yoshi's for jazz. We would get together for just hanging out at the house. And then, of course, Johnny was always able to take care of himself, and he would show up at my house with various stereo gear saying, hey, can you fix this one? And yeah, well, I still had a complete test bench with oscilloscope, distortion analyzers, and all that crap. So yeah, Johnny, I'll take care of that. And our lives just continue to be intertwined, and with great joy for both of us. And I know that those of you who are here also enjoyed that joy of knowing him and knowing his forward-looking, never able to stop character. I think the last real outing that Johnny and I had together was again with Dale, when we went up to Fortuna just a year ago in August to purchase, well, he purchased, I didn't want to have a thing to do with purchasing the thing, a 356 Porsche Cabriolet. And I don't know where it is now, but I hope it's in good hands. And I'm going to miss him. I'm going to miss him tremendously. The phone used to ring, and I'd just pick it up. And, John, yeah, well, hey, Johnny, what's up? And we would then talk for half an hour, 45 minutes. I mean, I had conversations with him from a canoe on a lake in New Hampshire. Anywhere I was, the phone would ring and we'd get it on. So thank you all for being here, and I hope others will share their experiences and their love for him and how much we're going to miss him. And that's really about it for me. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Greg Ford from Reno. 47-year associate and friend of Johnny. Johnny had his own style, flair, swagger, and a genuine nature. Of course, you all know that. I only say it because I know it. Many of you know how anecdotally, when Johnny was describing a great product, he would say, it has all the romance. That phrase always echoed with me. Johnny was the essence of that sort of thing. During Chicago CES years ago, I attended a presentation by Joe Sugarman. Some of you may remember the full page, no frills, text-heavy print advertisements of JS&A, Joe Sugarman and Associates. As a gimme and for fun, Sugarman passed out unembossed plastic Batman credit card blanks from a failed prior marketing effort to the attendees. I grabbed a few of them. I gave one to Johnny. He made good use of it. At notable restaurants, if the tab was large, Johnny would slip the Batman credit card into the folio, and the waiter would return, and laughter would ensue. The most memorable was at Gordon Restaurant on North Clark Street in Chicago, not far from the site where the St. Valentine's Day Massacre took place in 1929. My grandfather was working across the street that very day. I was born in '53. Raised in Chicago's Rogers Park neighborhood on the North Shore. I moved to Reno in '75 at the age of 21. I met Johnny a few years later. In memory of Johnny, I brought my Gordon Sinclair autographed salad plate.
Equestrian credit.
On another occasion during the great Sony days at CES around 1980, my wife and I were seated with Johnny on the mezzanine at Paul Anka's epic two-story disco supper nightclub, Jubilation. When Johnny told us the story of his used-to-be San Francisco band, the Mojo Men, having written the music to the 1967 hit Black is Black, made famous by the band Los Bravos, who put the words to it. I knew and really dug that song well before I met Johnny. It's in a nightclub. Magically, in the frenetic atmosphere, a couple of songs later, the DJ played that song. I sprung from my seat, grabbed my wife by the hand. We hustled down the stairs to the dance floor while Johnny watched. Johnny told me a car show story while displaying his '58 Corvette with Mike Sombrero. They wore matching t-shirts with 3 printed lines. No, it's not a 59. Yes, it's all original. No, it's not for sale. Classic Johnny. Some of you know Paul Fitzpatrick. Paul moved up to Reno from Danville a few years ago. We recently had lunch and swapped old hi-fi biz stories for a few hours. Johnny would say, life is a long series, string of stories. We all have memorable Johnny stories. Let's share them today with gusto. God bless Johnny, his family, friends, and all of you. Black is black. We want our Johnny back.
Gayle and I are going to read a poem written by my grandmother, Eileen. Both of my grandparents were very creative, in case you didn't know that. Again, my grandfather a photographer, my grandmother a poet, and also actually a pretty decent artist, which I do think passed on to my son Dominic, who has some artistic ability that doesn't exist anywhere else in the family that we know of.
I think this is a poem that my mother wrote for me for my 50th birthday. And we read it, Meredith and I read it at their 50th wedding anniversary. And we want to read it to you today.
What can I leave to you, my dears? You who pass the torch of life to future generations. So many things are fleeting, or go out of style, or break, or disintegrate into nothingness. The world is full of pain, ugliness, and sorrow. But I would not leave you these. I want to leave you something good, something permanent, something beautiful, something delightful.
First of all, I want to leave you love. The bright fire that burns, that wards off the coldest of the world. Love for one's mate, that strange magnetic force that is as old as time, yet is ever a miracle. Love for one's children, that cuddles and protects and guides and smooths their way a little bit. Love for one's friends, that communication between souls who are often lonely, often frightened, and often confused by life. And love of God, that takes the elements of the universe and gives them meaning.
Oh, so many beautiful things I give you. How can words express the framing brilliance of a tropical sunset or the spacious far horizon of a western one?
Of course, there are funny things, like ducks waddling down a path, puppies falling over their big paws, and babies learning to talk. I want you to have an abundant supply of humor. It compensates so much for the things we don't have.
There are the wonderful things to feel: sleek, silky fur of a cat, the softness of a down pillow, the crackling heat of a fire on a cold winter night, or the cool shade of a tree on a hot summer day. So many things, so many things. My mind is like a kaleidoscope with new and ever-changing images. The gold and red and rust of autumn woods, the majesty of blue and purple mountains, clouds like mounds of wood, waves of yellow wheat rippled by the wind, worn books and Beethoven symphonies, the still beauty of a new snow, and happy smiles are always beautiful.
So many things I cannot choose. I can only ask you to wake each morning and look at the world with fresh eyes. See the beautiful, work towards the good.
My dears, my dears. Thank you. Audience participation portion coming soon. I did not commit myself to sing at this service, but it's not pausing. But this is the one song my dad wanted sung, and I will invite you to sing along. The words are in your program. After, I'll tell you what. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. You might have noticed there are baseball caps that were all my dad's on some of the chairs. Feel free to take them. There's some clear screen in the lobby. It wouldn't be an event without clear screen, and you don't have to leave it, but we're gonna take it out for my dad. So thank you again for being here.